I hate camping. But when you're on a stag do, the rules are you do what the stag wants. And most of that suited me down to the ground. Hanging out with friends, playing sport, jumping off high things into the sea. And one of the nights we ended with a campfire on a cliffside overlooking the beach. And everything was going pretty well until we're about halfway back to the campsite. And I start to replay all of the steps we've taken to ensure that the fire's out. Think about the water that we've poured on and the extra bit of water that I poured on. The fact that even after most of the boys had headed off again, I'd stayed around continuing to stamp out the final embers, putting rocks on the coals. Like, the fire was out. I knew the fire was out. But I've always been prone to worry. I remember as a child sitting on my nan's knee, reciting to her all of my fears and concerns, because that's where worries went when I was a kid. They went to nan's house because she always knew how to deal with them. She'd sit, she'd listen, she'd laugh reassuringly in all of the right places. And then she'd recite verses of the Bible that she'd committed to memory. And she'd pray with me. And I suppose I learnt to copy her because it meant that whenever I worried or I was scared of something as a child, I'd do the same thing. I tried to remember as many of the words that my nan had said, and I'd pray. And I knew that no worry was ever too big or too small or too silly for my nan, and she always referred them on to God. And so I'd learnt that no worry was ever too big or too small or too silly for God either. And I think that one of the things my nan taught me was how to take the unreality of my fears and remind myself of what was true. And so I'm on my way back to the campsite. I'm starting to worry. And so I begin to pray and remind myself what's true. And I'm okay. We get back to the campsite, I get ready for bed, get myself into my sleeping bag. I'm sort of wriggling around trying to make myself comfortable, which is impossible because we're in a tent, but I'm doing my best. I'm about 5 to 10 minutes into attempting to fall asleep when suddenly it's like this door opens into my brain and in come flooding these thoughts that the fire has taken and it's sort of wreaking havoc as it spreads throughout the countryside where we're staying. And no matter how hard I try to conjure up the knowledge that I know this fire was out, it doesn't matter. I can't stop these thoughts from racing around my mind, and I start to shake uncontrollably. And it's like this darkness sort of surrounds the tent and enters in, and it's heavy, and I can feel it. And my mouth gets incredibly dry, and I try to reach out to my water bottle, but I can't move. And I know now that I was having a panic attack. And I'd been anxious before, but I'd never really had a panic attack. Eventually I managed to just about get enough movement over my limbs that I could reach out my hand towards my phone in the hopes of calling my wife. But of course, we're in a tent, we're camping, and so my phone's dead. And I've never felt more alone than I did in that moment. There's 2 of the lads in the tent, one of them a really good friend, but I can't explain to you the degree to which there's no logic going on in my mind at this point. And so it doesn't even occur to me that it would be a reasonable thing to wake one of these lads up and get them to help me. I can't come up with any sort of rational thinking whatsoever. Nothing helpful or hopeful crosses my mind until I manage to form one single coherent thought. Jake, you need a Bible. And usually there's one in my bag. There's almost always been one in my bag, but I took it out just a few weeks before. But there is a book in there, I've just bought it. I know that it's there, and so I open it up. I scramble through my bag. I get the book, and I sort of flick through the pages, expecting that there's probably some Bible in there somewhere. It's a book on weakness, and I get to chapter 1, page 4, and it says these words: "Like a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. For he knows how we are formed. He knows that we are dust." For lots of reasons, I've always found the idea that God is my father to be difficult. But in that moment, it just sat a little easier with me. It was like I was able to digest that reality more fully, and it was more comforting than those words had ever been before. And so as I sat reciting those words over and over and over again, praying that what was going on would stop, the experience of the physical symptoms didn't actually change very much. I was still shaking. My mouth was still dry. That darkness was still there. But I knew that I wasn't alone anymore. Like I knew it. I felt it. And suddenly, the next 3 or 4 hours that had seemed moments ago completely insurmountable, this endless night started to seem just slightly more bearable, because I wasn't alone anymore. I think I probably slept for like 2 hours combined of just drifting off and waking up in a panic. And as soon as I could see light coming through the tent, I got up and I went out and watched the sunrise. And it was beautiful. And it was just so bright in comparison to the darkness that I felt inside that tent. And I was still shaking. And my mouth was still dry. And I still hate camping. But I think perhaps I know now just a little more than I did before that I am made of dust, that I'm weak, but that's okay. Because I have a Father who knows those things, who knows me and loves me and has promised to never leave me on my own.